What happens when two powerhouse voices collide in the most uncomfortable television moment of the year? What you're about to witness is the exact moment everything went wrong between Teddy Swims and Kelly Clarkson, leading to one of the most shocking walk-offs in daytime television history. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment because this story gets more intense with every word. The studio lights were blazing as Kelly Clarkson settled into her signature chair, her $1 million smile firmly in place as she prepared to welcome her next guest. Across from her, Teddy Swims adjusted his position on the plush interview couch, his tattooed hands fidgeting slightly with the microphone clipped to his shirt. The audience was buzzing with excitement, completely unaware that they were about to witness television history in the making. "So Teddy," Kelly began, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made her a beloved talk show host. "Your rise to fame has been absolutely incredible. From posting covers in your bedroom to selling out arenas, it's like a fairy tale come true." Teddy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, though his smile remained intact. "Well, Kelly, I appreciate that, but I wouldn't exactly call it a fairy tale. There's been a lot of hard work, a lot of rejection, and a lot of people who didn't believe in what I was doing." "Oh, absolutely," Kelly nodded enthusiastically. "But that's what makes it so inspiring. You went from being this unknown guy to having millions of views almost overnight. It must feel amazing to finally get the recognition you deserve." The word finally seemed to hang in the air like a loaded weapon. Teddy's smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "I mean, I've been doing this for over a decade, Kelly. It wasn't overnight, and it wasn't about getting recognition I deserved. It was about staying true to my art regardless of whether anyone was paying attention." Kelly's laugh tinkled through the studio speakers. "But there was something slightly forced about it, right?" "Right. Of course. But you have to admit, social media really changed everything for you. Without platforms like TikTok and Instagram, would we even know who Teddy Swims is?" The question hit like a slap. Teddy's posture straightened, and for the first time since the interview began, his media-trained facade cracked slightly. "Are you suggesting that my success is just because of social media algorithms?" No, not at all," Kelly backtracked quickly, but her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm just saying that social media gave you a platform that maybe traditional routes didn't. I mean, let's be honest, the music industry can be pretty tough for artists who don't fit the typical mold." "What mold would that be exactly?" Teddy asked, his voice dropping to a lower register that anyone who knew him would recognize as a warning sign. Kelly seemed oblivious to the shift in energy. "You know, the whole tattooed, bearded, soulful guy thing. It's very trendy right now. Very authentic feeling, even if it's carefully crafted for social media consumption." The studio audience began to sense something was off. The comfortable chatter that usually accompanied Kelly's interviews had died down to an uncomfortable silence. Even the camera operators seemed to tense up behind their equipment. "Carefully crafted," Teddy repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying more weight than if he had shouted. "Kelly, these tattoos aren't a marketing strategy. This beard isn't a brand choice. This is who I am, and I've been who I am long before anyone gave a damn about authenticity." Kelly's smile became more strained, and she glanced quickly at her producers off camera. "Of course, Teddy, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I think what our viewers would love to know is how you maintain that authentic connection with your fans while managing the pressures of sudden fame." "Sudden fame," Teddy said, shaking his head slowly. "You keep using words like that, like I just appeared out of thin air with a guitar and a dream. Do you have any idea how many dive bars I played to audiences of 5 people? How many times I was told my voice was too soulful for country, too R&B for rock?" "I'm sure it was challenging," Kelly replied diplomatically, but her tone suggested she was ready to move on to safer territory. "Speaking of your voice, let's talk about your latest album. The production is so polished compared to those early bedroom recordings. It must be nice working with a real team of professionals." That was the final straw. Teddy's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and the temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. "A real team of professionals as opposed to what, Kelly?" "The fake amateurs I was working with before." Kelly realized she had stepped into quicksand, but instead of backing away, she seemed to sink deeper. "I just meant that having access to proper studios and experienced producers must have elevated your sound significantly. There's nothing wrong with getting help to reach your full potential." "Help to reach my full potential," Teddy repeated, his voice dripping with barely controlled frustration. "Let me ask you something, Kelly. When you won American Idol, Did people tell you that Simon Cowell and the show's production team helped you reach your full potential, or did they recognize that the talent was already there? The comparison caught Kelly off guard, and for the first time in the interview, she seemed genuinely flustered. That's different, Teddy. American Idol is a competition show. It's designed to find and showcase existing talent. And what do you think I was doing in those dive bars and bedroom recordings? Playing hide and seek. Teddy's voice was rising now, and the studio audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I was showcasing my talent to anyone who would listen for years before any algorithm or professional team or fairy tale moment you want to romanticize. Kelly's media training kicked in, and she tried to regain control of the interview. Teddy, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. I have nothing but respect for your journey and your talent. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. But Teddy was beyond diplomatic recovery. No, Kelly, I think we got off on exactly the foot you intended. You brought me here thinking you could package my story into some feel-good segment about social media success and professional polish without bothering to understand what that story actually is. The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Camera operators were getting conflicting signals from directors. Audience members were looking at each other with wide eyes, and Kelly Clarkson, for perhaps the first time in her hosting career, appeared to be completely out of her depth. I think what our audience would really benefit from, Kelly said, her voice slightly shaky, is hearing about your creative process and how you choose which songs to record. My creative process? Teddy laughed, but there was no humor in it. My creative process is taking every rejection, every dismissal, every person who looked at me and decided I didn't fit their idea of what a musician should look like and turning that pain into something beautiful. My creative process is being authentic in a world that's constantly trying to sell you a version of authenticity. Kelly's face was flushed now, and she was clearly struggling to maintain her composure. Teddy, I understand you're passionate about your music, but I think you might be misinterpreting my questions. Am I? Teddy leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think my success is some combination of lucky timing, social media manipulation, and professional intervention. It sounds like you can't quite believe that someone who looks like me, with my background, could actually have something real to offer. The studio had gone completely silent except for the low hum of equipment and the occasional nervous cough from the audience. This was no longer an interview. It was a confrontation, and everyone present knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Kelly's face hardened, and for a moment the mask of television professionalism slipped completely. Teddy, I think you're being unfair. I've interviewed hundreds of artists, and I've always been supportive of different paths to success. Supportive? Teddy's voice was incredulous. Kelly, in the last 10 minutes, you've implied that my success is accidental, my authenticity is manufactured, my early work was amateur, and my talent needed professional intervention to be worthwhile. If that's your idea of supportive, I'd hate to see what you consider hostile. The audience was now completely silent, hanging on every word. Some were pulling out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. The show's producers were frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but both Kelly and Teddy seemed oblivious to everything except each other. Kelly's voice took on a sharper edge. I'm trying to have a conversation about your career trajectory, Teddy. If you're going to take every question as a personal attack, maybe you're not ready for this level of media attention. The words hit the studio like a bomb. Teddy's eyes widened and several audience members audibly gasped. Even the camera operators seemed to flinch. Not ready for this level of media attention? Teddy repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. Let me get this straight, Kelly. You think I'm not ready for media attention because I won't sit here and let you diminish everything I've worked for? Kelly seemed to realize she had crossed the line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. I think artists who want to succeed at this level need to be able to handle tough questions and different perspectives without getting defensive. Tough questions. Teddy stood up from the couch, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the interview setup. Kelly, asking me about my music, my influences, my writing process, those would be tough questions. What you've been doing is trying to rewrite my story to fit whatever narrative makes you comfortable. Kelly remained seated, but her posture was rigid. I'm trying to help our viewers understand your journey. Teddy, sometimes that means asking questions that might not be what you want to hear. Help our viewers understand? Teddy's laugh was bitter. Or help yourself understand how someone like me could succeed without going through the same system that validated you. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Kelly's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to anger to something that looked almost like panic. That's completely out of line. Teddy, is it? Teddy was pacing now, his hands gesturing emphatically. Because from where I stand, it seems like you can't wrap your head around the fact that there are artists out there who didn't need a television competition, who didn't need industry gatekeepers, who didn't need permission from people like you to make music that matters. Kelly's voice rose to match his energy. People like me? What is that supposed to mean? It means people who think success has to look a certain way, come through certain channels, be approved by certain institutions. It means people who are so invested in their own version of how things should work that they can't see talent when it doesn't fit their predetermined mold. The studio was electric with tension. Audience members were shifting in their seats, some looking toward the exits, others leaning forward as if watching a car crash in slow motion. The show's band members, usually relaxed and jovial during interviews, were sitting at attention like soldiers waiting for orders. Kelly's composure was unraveling completely. Now, you know what, Teddy? I've been doing this show for years. I've made artists feel welcome. I've celebrated their success. I've given them a platform to share their stories. If you can't appreciate that, maybe the problem isn't with my questions. Make artists feel welcome? Teddy stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. Kelly, you've spent this entire interview trying to convince me and everyone watching that my success is somehow illegitimate, that my authenticity is fake, and that my talent isn't real without professional polish. If that's your idea of making someone feel welcome, I'd hate to be your enemy. Kelly shot to her feet, finally abandoning any pretense of maintaining control. You're putting words in my mouth, Teddy. I never said any of those things. You didn't have to say them directly, Teddy shot back. Every question was designed to undermine something. Every comment was loaded with the assumption that I'm somehow less legitimate than artists who came up through traditional channels. That's paranoid and ridiculous, Kelly snapped, her voice echoing through the studio. I ask similar questions to all my guests about their journey and their process. Do you? Teddy's eyes were blazing now. Do you ask Taylor Swift if her success is just because of social media algorithms? Do you ask John Legend if his early work was too amateur before professional producers got involved? Do you ask any of your mainstream pop guests if they're not ready for media attention when they push back on your characterizations? Kelly's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. That's not a fair comparison, and you know it. Why isn't it fair, Kelly? Because they fit your idea of what a successful artist looks like. Because their path to success makes sense to you in a way that mine doesn't. The producers were now making increasingly frantic gestures, but both hosts seemed completely absorbed in their confrontation. The studio audience was witnessing something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the carefully orchestrated world of daytime television. Kelly's voice was shaking with anger. Now you're being incredibly unprofessional. Teddy, this is supposed to be a celebration of your success, not an attack on my integrity as a host. Unprofessional. Teddy's voice dropped to a growl. Kelly, you've spent the last 20 minutes systematically attacking everything about my career, my authenticity, and my readiness for success. And you want to talk to me about professionalism. I have not attacked anything, Kelly insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. I've asked legitimate questions about your career. Legitimate questions? Like whether I'm just a social media creation. Legitimate questions like whether my music needed professional intervention to be worthwhile. Legitimate questions like whether I'm ready for this level of attention. Teddy's voice was rising with each example. Kelly's face was flushed red now, and she seemed to be struggling with something between embarrassment and rage. You're twisting everything I said. Am I? Teddy gestured toward the audience, many of whom were nodding in agreement with him. Because I think everyone in this room heard exactly what you said and how you said it. Kelly looked around the studio desperately, as if searching for someone to validate her perspective, but found only uncomfortable faces and averted eyes. Even her own production team seemed to be distancing themselves from the situation. This is my show, Teddy, Kelly said finally, her voice tight with control. I've been nothing but welcoming and supportive. And if you can't see that, maybe you should reconsider whether you want to be here. The ultimatum hung in the air like a challenge. Teddy stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with controlled breathing. The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. You know what, Kelly? Teddy said finally, his voice eerily calm after the storm of the previous exchange. Maybe I should reconsider. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for the interview. Kelly's eyes widened as she realized what was happening, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Teddy, don't be dramatic. We can work through this. Work through what, Kelly? Your complete inability to respect what I've accomplished? Your need to tear down my story so it fits your comfortable narrative. Teddy began unhooking his microphone with deliberate, measured movements. There's nothing to work through here. Kelly's voice became desperate, finally understanding the gravity of what was unfolding. Teddy, please. You're misunderstanding my intentions. I brought you here because I believe in your talent. Teddy paused in removing his microphone and looked at her with something between pity and disgust. You brought me here because I'm trending. Kelly, you brought me here because booking me would get you views and social media buzz. Don't confuse that with believing in my talent. That's not true, Kelly protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I genuinely wanted to share your story with my audience. My story? Teddy's laugh was hollow. Kelly, you haven't asked me a single question about my actual story. You haven't asked about the music that saved my life. The fans who supported me before anyone knew my name. The struggles that shaped every song I've ever written. You've been too busy trying to figure out how to diminish what I've built. The studio audience was transfixed, watching this unprecedented moment unfold. Some were still recording on their phones. Others sat frozen in shock. The show's band members looked like they were watching a natural disaster in real time. Kelly's composure crumbled completely. I don't understand why you're being so hostile. I've always been supportive of artists from all backgrounds. Backgrounds? Teddy's voice was sharp as a blade. Kelly, you've made it crystal clear that you don't consider my background legitimate. Every question has been designed to explain away my success rather than celebrate it. I never said your background wasn't legitimate, Kelly shot back. But even she seemed to hear how weak it sounded. You didn't have to say it, Teddy replied, finally freeing the microphone from his shirt. When you suggest that social media is the only reason people know who I am, you're saying my music isn't good enough to stand on its own. When you imply that my early work needed professional polish to be worthwhile, you're saying I wasn't talented enough without help. When you question whether I'm ready for media attention, you're saying I don't belong at this level. Kelly looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would intervene, but the production team seemed frozen. Teddy, I think you're reading too much into casual interview questions. Casual? Teddy's voice cracked with disbelief. Kelly, there was nothing casual about the way you've conducted this interview. Every question was loaded. Every comment was designed to undermine. This wasn't an interview. It was an interrogation. The silence that followed was deafening. Kelly seemed to be struggling with something internal, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Finally, she played what she clearly thought was her trump card. You know what, Teddy? Maybe this reaction is exactly why some people in the industry have concerns about working with you. Maybe this attitude is why you had to build your career outside traditional channels. The accusation hit the studio like a thunderclap. Several audience members audibly gasped, and even the camera operators seemed to recoil. Teddy went completely still, his face darkening with an emotion that went beyond anger. There it is, he said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a whisper in a cathedral. There's the real Kelly Clarkson. Not the supportive host, not the champion of artists, but someone who thinks that questioning her narrative means there's something wrong with me. Kelly seemed to realize immediately that she had made a catastrophic error. Teddy, I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Yes, you did, Teddy said with absolute certainty. You meant it exactly the way it sounded. You think that because I won't sit here and let you rewrite my story, because I won't pretend that your dismissive questions are supportive, there must be something wrong with my attitude. You think the problem is with me, not with your complete inability to understand or respect what I represent. Kelly's voice was barely above a whisper now. That's not what I think. Isn't it? Teddy challenged. Because you just suggested that my reaction to your disrespect is proof that the industry was right to overlook me. You just validated every gatekeeper who ever told me I wasn't good enough. Every executive who said I didn't fit. Every person who made me feel like I had to prove my worth. The studio was completely silent except for the mechanical hum of equipment. Kelly looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The audience seemed to be holding their collective breath, afraid that any sound might shatter the moment. Teddy held up the microphone he had removed, looking at it like it was something distasteful. You know what the most insulting part of all this is, Kelly? I actually respected you. I thought you were different, because you came from a competition show, because you understood what it was like to have your talent questioned. But you're just another industry insider who can't see past your own limited perspective. Teddy, please. Kelly's voice was breaking now. I made mistakes in this interview. Let me make it right. Make it right. Teddy shook his head slowly. Kelly, you can't unmake the last 30 minutes. You can't unsay the things you've said, or unthink the thoughts that led you to say them. This interview has shown me exactly who you are, and exactly what you think of artists like me. He placed the microphone on the side table next to his chair with deliberate care, as if it were made of glass. I came here thinking I was going to have a conversation with someone who understood the struggle, who appreciated the journey. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks my success is a fluke and my authenticity is a marketing strategy. Kelly was openly desperate now, her media training completely abandoned. Teddy, I swear that's not what I think. Please don't leave like this. Teddy looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was sad rather than angry. Kelly, the tragedy here isn't that you think these things about me. The tragedy is that you probably think these things about a lot of artists who don't fit your narrow definition of legitimacy. How many other guests have sat in this chair and felt what I'm feeling right now? None, Kelly said desperately. This has never happened before. Maybe not, Teddy replied, standing up from the couch with finality. But maybe that's because other people were more willing to smile and nod while you diminished their achievements. Maybe that's because other people were more concerned with being polite than being honest. He looked out at the stunned audience, many of whom were still recording the unprecedented scene. I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I hope you understand that sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than being polite. Kelly made one last desperate attempt. Teddy, you're throwing away a huge opportunity here. This show reaches millions of people. Teddy paused at the edge of the interview area and turned back to face her one final time. Kelly, I'd rather reach nobody than reach millions of people through someone who doesn't respect what I've built. My music speaks for itself, and it doesn't need validation from people who can't see its worth. With that, he walked off the set, leaving Kelly sitting alone in her chair, facing an audience that had just witnessed television history. The cameras kept rolling as she stared after him, her face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been regret. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, boo, or sit in stunned silence. The producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the situation, and Kelly Clarkson, for the first time in her hosting career, seemed completely speechless. As Teddy disappeared through the studio exit, the weight of what had just happened settled over everyone present. This wasn't just a walk-off, it was a statement. It was a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and debated for years to come. And it all started with what Kelly thought would be a simple, supportive interview. The music industry would never look at either of them the same way again. What do you think? Was Teddy right to walk off, or should he have stayed and tried to work things out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe for more stories that show what really happens when the cameras are rolling.